We'll stay in similar vein with a similar story, shall we? Next, EU leaders gather for an informal dinner in Brussels, but the main course will undoubtedly be the Eurozone's crippling debt crisis. There's a growing belief that the austerity drive heralded by France and Germany has now backfired, sending weaker countries into a spiral of decline, like Italy I was talking about then. Europe's appetite's moving away from austerity, with Greece on the brink of leaving the Eurozone, while Spain's rocked by protests against further cuts. Reports say single currency member nations are preparing backup plans now for the consequences of a Greek exit. These are actually live pictures we got coming through from Brussels. It's been interesting. Breaking from tradition, Mr. Hollande did not hold a pre-summit meeting with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. That could be an omen, maybe, for how they're going to work together in the future. Of course, they've been such big players for austerity before Hollande came on the scene. He wants the strategy now to shift to growth, something that Germany's very reluctant to agree with, but they have to try and find some middle ground. Both sides need to reach a compromise ahead of what could be a decisive second Greek election in June. We'll be following that closely. But officially, the focus is firmly on growth at this summit. Only officially, at least, although it's going to be on everyone's tongue there, will the talk be about Greece maybe having to go. So they're trying to keep a positive eye on this. Let's talk to John Lachlan, the Director of Studies in the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation. He's joining us on the line from Rome. I was just talking about Italy just then. There's been a big clampdown there on taxes, people trying to get the money back in, the authorities. Everyone's trying to save a penny to try and make this work, aren't they? Now, as I mentioned, Eurozone countries are being advised to prepare their own contingency plans just in case Greece quits the euro. What does it tell us about their common determination to save the country these days? Is that determination less than when we were reporting on this, speculating about it 6 months ago, a year ago?
I don't think it is. I think that on the one hand, the warning that contingency plans should be made is a realistic one, because I think that there is a very great danger that a very great probability that the euro will break up. But even though I am a long-term critic of the euro and the euro project, my view remains that the European political class will do anything, and I mean anything, to keep it together. In other words, I think that this call to set up contingency plans is in fact brinkmanship. It's brinkmanship addressed to the Greek electorate, because the Greek electorate is trying to be is being forced into a corner by the European political class. The European political class, by issuing this warning, is trying to make it clear to Greek voters that they have to choose the euro and they have to choose the austerity programme. So I think it's brinkmanship. OK, right, fine. But if it doesn't work, if something happens and they just couldn't push this through and it does drop the currency, what kind of consequences would that create? The consequences, I think, would be catastrophic. At least that's certainly what the Europeans meeting in Brussels this evening think. In one sense, this analysis is rather odd, because even under the terms of the present bailout, investors, that is to say banks, people who hold Greek debt, have written off more than 50% of the face value. And in terms of lost investments, they have written off something like 3/4, I think, of their total investment. So even under the terms of the so-called bailout, which is supposed to keep the whole show on the road, there have been massive losses over Greece. What the European political class is afraid of, however, is what they called an uncontrolled default. That is to say, of events taking place which the European political leaders, think they do not control. These people are control freaks. They want to feel that they're in control. And to some extent they're right, because the world is awash with debt, and what they want to try and do is prevent panic. And I think that's the key. The thing they mainly fear is fear itself.
Looking at the official agenda of this meeting in Brussels, it's about growth and investment. I mentioned just now something very opposite, of course, from the austerity drive that we've witnessed and heard so much about for the last few years. Do you see this transition happening anytime soon, though? Is it reality? Can it be reality? No,
it's just hot air. François Hollande promised growth when to get elected. The Germans have always said that growth and cutting deficits go together. It's all just words. You can't magic growth out of thin air. You have to undergo enormous structural change. There has to be a kind of revolution, really, in Europe, in its practices, in its laws, in its social state, and above all in its work ethic and culture. So no, it's just a way of reassuring François Hollande, who has an electorate, who has an election coming up in June, as the Greeks do, and to try and put as brave a face as possible on what is, by any chalk, a terribly catastrophic situation in Europe.
So you're not expecting anything big to come out from this meeting tonight? Hot air, I guess, is what you're saying. There's not a lot coming out of it. I wonder what's going to happen when Greece goes to the poll again on June the 17th. Those elections, is that going to be a game changer in any shape or form?
Well, it could be. I've said before on this channel that obviously the elections are going to be elections, at least unless there's a military coup in Greece, which, by the way, I don't rule out, or some other kind of coup. Elections will obviously decide it. The strange thing is, though, as I'm sure you know, is that the leader of the New Left Party, the man who emerged really as the effective winner of the original poll and who may well be able to form a majority on June the 17th, he says he wants to keep his country in the euro. But of course he doesn't want the austerity plan. Now, if he were to be elected and to renege on the austerity plan as he's promised to do, then I have to say I think the game would then probably be up. The rug would be pulled on the so-called bailout plan, and presumably there would be some kind of collapse in Greece, some kind of default. But for the time being, it's still impossible to predict that with certainty, precisely because, as I say, even he, who is the strongest opponent of the austerity plan, even he says he wants to keep Greece in the euro. And that's, by the way, why I said that earlier that there was brinkmanship, because what the European leaders are trying to do is to force the Greeks to understand that they have to choose the austerity plan.
John Loughlin, thanks for your thoughts as ever, Director of Studies in the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation, on the line. From, of course, the heart of some of this that's going on in Rome tonight, down there in southern Europe. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.